Thank you, Uroš. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to give a lecture among top experts in neuroscience. I am not a neuroscientist at all, so my field of research is basically on motor learning and motor performance. But it's a pleasure for me to give a presentation here and to introduce my research topic. So I would like to just briefly start with, maybe I should use the, okay, it's working. I'm originally from Iran. I moved to Czech Republic around 9 years ago to the Faculty of Physical Culture at Pulaski University in Olomouc. Here is the city center of Olomouc. It's a very beautiful city. It's a small town, about 100,000 inhabitants, and it's in Czech Republic, it's in Moravia, part of Czech Republic. So here is Prague, here is Olomouc, and here is Brno, so in Australia. From Olomouc to Australia is to Vienna is about 2 hours driving. I hope you visit us. I showed you the map. Now you have the address. So I hope sometime you will be able to visit us. We have, as Uroš already mentioned, we have 2 international teaching weeks per semester 1, and then we are happy to host you there. So you have some possibilities through Erasmus program, so hopefully you can come and visit us. So let's move to the next topic. Initially, I want to introduce you the field of research that I am conducting. Basically, I am working on the topic of optimizing performance through intrinsic motivation and attention for learning, which shortly is called optimal theory for motor learning. And under this theory, there are 2 main components. One is attentional focus, and the second one is motivation. So attention focus has been divided to internal or external focus in terms of direction. And motivation, basically under this theory, is driven from self-determination theory presented by Ryan and Deci. And there are 2 components under this motivational aspect, which is autonomy support and enhanced expectancies. So under this theory, it's proposing that if you want to enhance performance or learning, you need to direct attentional focus of the learners in a proper way, and also you need to provide motivation for them at the same time. So in this speech, I only focus on attentional focus. And hopefully in the next lectures or next summer school, I will be able to present also some topics related to motivational aspect. Maybe in few slides, in 1-2 slides, I have one study which is combined. So I also briefly talk about one of these motivational aspects. So attentional focus instructions. I know that majority of you are familiar with this concept of attention and attentional focus in general. You know it much more than me. From a behavioral standpoint, I would like to introduce it to you. As you can see in the pictures, during the learning or performance, the learners they need some sort of instructions. So the coaches usually, they have some verbal communications with the learners. And this verbal communication is very much crucial. because it brings some information for the athletes about the techniques, how to perform a motor skill. For example, in this picture, as you can see, the basketball coach is trying to demonstrate to the learners, to the kids, how to perform a basketball throwing task, how to hold the ball, what could be the proper angle of the hand for throwing the ball, etc. Or in tennis is the same. The coach is providing some sort of information for the learners that where they should need to focus on, how to, in the tennis task, how to hold the racket, in which direction, in which the angle they have to perform the stroke task, the ball. So as you can see, the coach is in communication with the athletes. So these verbal instructions is necessary, exist all the time. Even if one experimental setting that you are providing, in that experimental setting also you need to provide some sort of basic information for the participants. So we always need verbal communications. So these verbal communication or verbal instructions, they induce the focus of attention of learners. So in definition, focus of attention is defined as concentration on the relevant feature of the movement, which could be induced by instructions or by feedback. So if somebody is performing the task incorrectly, so the coach goes to him and provides feedback. That feedback also can direct attention of learners either to internally or externally. And the studies, they have shown that focus of attention is a factor that influences learning. In terms of direction, as you can see here, focus of attention has been divided to either internally or externally. I always use this picture in my presentations because I think when we are talking about attentional focus, we are talking about some brain functions, so something which is happening in the brain. So that's why I like this picture, because the source of the direction of attention starts from the brain. So what is internal focus of attention? Internal focus is defined as focus on the body movements. So when we are performing a task, when we are asking participants or the learners to focus on the wrist, on the arm, on the shoulder, on the muscles, on the certain angles that they need to produce with their arms, for example. So we are directing the attention of learners internally. So I created this picture. As you can see, when we are talking about attention focus, for example, internally, so it's a mental process which is happening and going from the brain to the hand, for example, during the bowling task, right? So during the whole procedure of the performing bowling task, the attention focus is directed to the, for example, arm movements. On the other hand, when we are talking about external focus of attention, it has been defined as focus on intended movement effect, which could be implement, apparatus, or the target. I use this there are different things that you can use. For example, you can direct the attention to the device. You can direct the attention, for example, if there is a ball, to the ball. If there is a target, to the target. All these things could be considered as external cue for the participant. So on the opposite side, as you can see here, so during the performance of the bowling task, the attention focus, for example, in this certain task, is directed to the ball. So it's a mental process, but the focus is on the ball. Okay? So I would like to introduce the first study that was conducted by Professor Gabriele Wolf on the concept of internal or external focus of attention. And in the first study, you can see also this is Professor Wolf as well. She's performing this ski simulator task. So they had 33 subjects. They were healthy individuals. And the task was to move the platform of the ski simulator to the left and right as far as possible by making slalom type movements. So participants were divided to 3 groups. In the external focus, the direction of attention was try to exert force on the outer wheels as long as the platform moved in the respective direction. And the internal focus, try to exert force on the outer foot as long as the platform moved to the respective direction. As you can see, there is a very small change in the direction of attention. Like one is outer wheels and is outer foot. So it's a small change in the instructions and the control group. So they had totally 20 90-second practice trials over 2 days. And here are the findings. As you can see here, on the day 1, all the groups, they had some progress. And then on the day 2, they had some pre-test on the day 1 and then post-test here, pre-test and post-test on the day 2. And but the most interesting findings were observed during the retention test. And during retention test, as you can see, external focus was better than either internal or control conditions. So the findings of this study, they are suggesting that external focus was more effective in producing large movement amplitude than both internal and control groups. So this is the first experiment conducted by Dr. Wolf. In the same study, they conducted the second experiment. And in this experiment, there were only two focus conditions. So the task was to keep the balance, to maintain the balance on a stabilometer. And they used some markers in front of the participants, as you can see. And the markers, they were there in both conditions, internal and external focus. And in the external focus, they asked to focus on the red markers and try to keep them at the same height. In the internal focus, focus on your feet and try to keep them at the same height. So you can see still, like there are very small change in the instructions. And then there was 14 90-second practice trials over 2 days. And here are the findings. As you can see, over day 1, they had some progress in the task, and on the day 2 as well. But the most interesting findings were on retention test. As you can see, root mean square error was lower in external focus compared to internal focus. So they suggest that there was no advantage for external focus during practice, but the external focus was better than internal focus during retention tests. So I think after this study, the huge discussion about attention focus started since 1998. That was the first publication. And researchers started to investigate whether the benefits of external focus still exist in other task situations and in regard to a skill level, etc. So, and research studies conducted by the couple of other researchers and also by Dr. Wolf, they have shown already that if you try to encourage athletes or performers or the learners to focus externally, they perform better and they learn better than internal focus. For example, and some examples of the external focus is focus on the ball trajectory or focus on the landing point in tennis. Or here in the basketball throwing task, focus on the basket or focus on the ball trajectory. Depending on the level of the skill level of the participants, you can adjust your instructions. Or on the pedalo task, here is also focusing on the boards was more effective than focusing on the feet. During the jumping task, focusing on the rungs of the measurement device was better than focusing on the hand. And also in the golf putting task it was the same, focusing on the club motion. Or when you want to use some sort of force production task, focusing on the bar was more effective than focusing on the hands. One of the challenges that the researchers had was when we have some implement, so it's easy to find external focus cue, but when we don't have implement, it's very difficult to find external focus cue, so you need to be somehow a little bit creative. So in one study, they also find advantages of external focus when they ask participants jumping as fast as the start line as possible. So that was considered as a kind of external focus cue. On the swimming task, the pushing the water back is more effective than pushing your hands back. And I also conducted one study on gymnastics task. So it was like jumping and half turn. So this jumping and half turn is one gymnastic skills that they use it. And in this task also we use the kind of marker on the chest of the participants. And we ask participants to focus on this marker while turning. And the findings were also showing that the external focus was more beneficial than internal focus. So I was struggling to find this external focus cue for almost 4 years. That I was thinking in gymnastics, we don't have it in gymnastic exercise, how you can find external focus cue. So it took a lot of time for me to come up with this idea. And then it worked. So here is kind of like, I would like to a little bit in practice show to you that how it works. I mean, not how it works, I will just give you some sort of feeling about internal external focus. So I chose this video, and after demonstration of this video, I would like to ask you to some volunteers, they can come here and try and see how is their feeling when we are manipulating with internal or external focus cue. So I find this video very much interesting, I hope.
One of the best things that I've worked with here is talking about the difference between internal focus and external focus. From an internal focus, when we're talking to students, we're talking to coaches, we say things like, I want internal rotation of the hips. I want internal rotation of the shoulder. Or I want shoulder slope or posture. I want scap loading. These are all terms that I think we use online, we use in coaching circles. But to a player, those things are not really helpful. So I've got to translate those into an external focus, something that's outside of the body, not thinking about. So I want to make sure that when I'm speaking and working with drills, I have an external focus. So, for example, if I'm working with a hitter and I want them to internally rotate their hips towards the catcher in their load, I'm not going to tell them I want you to internally rotate your hips to the catcher. Okay, but to me that's not helpful to them. But I might say something like, hey, show your back pocket to the pitcher. I might say, turn your belly button to the catcher. Okay, it's something that actually makes sense to them. The same thing with, using your shoulders. We come across a lot of hitters who their shoulders do this when they load, stride, and they do all kinds of things. But I want their shoulders to have some depth. So I might say, I want to put the bat in the shoulders and say, hey, I want you to rock the baby. And they get some shoulder depth this way. Okay? And so just remembering how to find your own terms based on the level of person that you're working with. I can tell you that for me, the term seesaw, when it comes to internal and external rotation of the shoulders, to me, seesaw is a term that works for my 26-year-old major leaguers and my 6-year-old son.
So I found this video a couple of days ago, and I really liked it because I think that this coach is really creative in finding some sort of external focus cue. And I think this is the way that we should treat with external focus. That's my opinion. So now, so I use 2 tasks. I need maybe 1 volunteer for now, if somebody would like to try and to keep this object as happy as possible. So the task is like, try to hold the object as stable as possible, okay? And then walking. Somebody would like to try it? Yeah? Yeah, please.
One beer last night with
okay. Yeah. Okay. So initially, just try to. Yeah. Perfect. It's easy. It's not difficult. So now I would like to ask you, please focus on your hand.
Yeah.
And try to walk. Mm-hmm. So stay the same place. So the task goal is the same, but I would like to ask you to focus on the stick, and then you can walk.
Okay.
So how do you feel? Like, can you just express your feeling? Did you feel like more comfortable when you direct your...
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's the more distal part. Try and control the more distal part. I felt more comfortable, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it will be even more challenging, for example, if you can walk up the stairs, I think the difference also will be more. I don't know if you like to try it or not, but you want to try?
Again, so, yeah. Should I focus on?
Yeah, first focus on your hand and try to walk up.
Well, where do I look? I mean, if I focus
It's not about looking from the beginning. Yeah. The purpose of the task is to keep it as stable as keep the object as stable as possible, but focus on your hand.
Okay.
Now change it, yes, to the stick. Good job. Yeah, that's one example of just changing the direction of attention. So in fact, we didn't change the task goal. The task goal was the same, keeping the object as stable as possible. But we just simply manipulated with the direction of attention, right? That's one example of manipulation with attention focus. Another one, these are my toys. So if somebody else would like to try some interceptive task, Florian, would you like to try? You are the guy in attention focus, so. So please hold this, then I will, maybe you can stay in the other direction. So, no, hold it in this way. I don't know if it is comfortable. Maybe you can use this one. No, it's okay, right? Yeah? So, just first of all, like few practice trials, I throw come please a little bit closer. So you can just try to catch the ball, okay? Perfect. Good. So you know what is the task, right? So now I would like to ask you to focus on your hand, not to look at it, just mentally focus on your hand. Okay? Ready? Mentally, please focus on your hand. Now, focus on the glass, the cup. Okay? Focus on the cup. One more time. You don't focus, I'm sure. Ready?
Yeah.
No. One more time. The direction was changing. It's okay, just we have more balls. So the general idea is like, you could feel some change, right? You could feel, you can just express your feeling, like how was it?
Yeah, when I focus on the cup, it's a bit easier.
Yeah? So there is just like a simple change in the direction of attention. The instructions could be also, for example, focus on the ball. You know, but I just didn't want to change the task goal. I wanted to keep it the same task goal, but just to change the direction of attention, which is really close to each other. It's just hand versus the cup, right? Thank you. Great. So now, like, there is a better feeling about this concept. No. So as I already mentioned, there are a lot of studies within the last, let's say, 24, 5 years. And majority of the studies, I wouldn't say all, but majority of these studies, they are supporting the advantages of external relative to internal in different population, adults, also children, in discrete motor tasks, in continuous motor tasks, which actually they are under different motor control systems, and then also in some specific populations, such as, for example, children with ADHD, in throwing tasks, throwing tennis balls in children with intellectual disabilities, reaching tasks in individuals with and without cerebral vascular accidents, and jumping in children with developmental coordination disorders. And also in continuous tasks, in balance tasks in Parkinson's disease, gait in Parkinson's disease, balance in individual with ankle sprain, and gait in patients with multiple scoliosis, and balance in individual with visual impairments. So I will present a couple of these studies, not all, of course, just to give you a feeling about the ongoing research in this area. So one study is about effectiveness of attention focus in individual with and without cerebral vascular accident. So in this study, there were 16 participants, and then there were 3 tasks. As you can see, one, removing a can from a shelf and placing it on the table. The second task was taking an apple off a shelf and putting it into a basket. And the third one was moving an empty coffee mug from the table onto a saucer. So they manipulated with the direction of attention. In one group, they asked participants to pay attention to the can, for example. That was an example. Think about where it is on the shelf and how big or heavy it is. Or external, pay attention to your arm. Like again, like a little bit changing the direction of attention. And then the findings of this study showed that significantly shorter movement time and greater peak velocity for reaching under external focus condition for all 3 tasks than internal focus condition. So that's one of the studies that supports advantages of external relative to internal in specific populations. Another study was conducted on individuals with ankle sprain. So there were 40 volunteers who already had this experience with ankle sprain. And the task was single leg support stand on the injured ankle in 3 different stability levels. So they also, in this study, it was interesting that they are manipulating with different task difficulties. So the level 6 is the least stable, and level 2 is the most stable. And then manipulated also with attention focus. External focus, keep your balance by stabilizing the platform, and in the internal focus, stabilizing your body. And they measured, they had 3 dependent variable: overall stability index, anterior posterior stability index, and medial lateral stability index. And you can see in this study, they published 2 papers with this study. In the first one also, they found that external focus group experienced a significant decrease in overall stability index and anterior posterior stability index between pre-training and post-training. And also in the task with the medium level, they found significant progress for the external focus and internal focus in 2 stability index. And then in the level 2, as you can see, they found significant differences in all 3 stability index. So they suggest that an external focus of attention is advantageous for learning of a postural control task following an ankle injury. So this might be more relevant and more interesting for you, because I know that the focus of this summer school is basically on individuals with Parkinson's disease. So the first study on Parkinson's disease was conducted in 2005 and then 2009. So this is one of those studies, 2009. And there were 14 participants diagnosed with idiopathic Parkinson's disease. And the task was standing on the rubber disc. External focus on reducing movement of the disc. And then internal focus on reducing the movement of their foot, and control no focus instructions. And the design of the task was within subject, so it was a performance study, and the center of pressure was measured. As you can see here, that in the findings of this study also, the external focus, center of pressure for external focus was better than both internal and control conditions. And then they suggest that external focus instructions reduce postural instability in individuals with Parkinson's disease. So that might be interesting for you. And there is another study which I found it recently. I'm not used to give a presentation for the experts in neuroscience or Parkinson's disease or clinicians. But I try to find some studies which are relevant to the topic of this summer school. So in this study also they manipulated with attentional focus. So the single task was counting task in a sitting position, and then they asked participants to walk and then to count. So they consider this as a dual tasking. And in this study, they use some markers. As you can see, I like the creativity of the authors in this study also. They put some markers on the feet of the participants. And then they ask participants to focus on the movement of the colored labels, for example, red, yellow, or green. And then in the internal focus on the movement of your limbs. And they also had like a non-active control group. So the design of this experiment actually was, in total, they had, I guess, 47 participants at the end, and 42 external, 24 external, 23 internal, and control 16. And they went under 11-week training protocol under this instruction, which is like really interesting. And then 8-week rest interval, and they had some sort of post-assessment. And as you can see here, there were some differences in step time, and also percentage of time in double support, and also here in the dual tasking, while performing the dual tasking. So the authors in dual task walking, improvements were found immediately and 8 weeks after the cessation of an externally focused exercise program. Internal focus of attention exercise proved detrimental to dual tasking walking in individuals with Parkinson's disease. Another finding of this study is that which might be interesting for people who are working in Parkinson's disease. They suggest that although benefits of motor symptoms were found after both externally and internally focused exercise, focusing externally on the effect of an action on environment while exercising provided greater improvements to unified Parkinson's disease rating scale motor section. So they use this scale. And this scale assessment has been found to reflect the level of dopamine present in the basal ganglia. So this was also interesting findings that they had in this study. And the conclusion, this finding suggests that external focus of attention exercise may improve the functioning of automatic control network in Parkinson's disease. So if somebody is interested in the details of this study, you may have a look at the reference. So another study which we conducted with our colleagues in Brazil, I was visiting one of my colleagues there, and then we decided to conduct this experiment. It was an individual with severe visual impairments. So we used two tasks. The first task was a balance task, as you can see. It was pedalo. So they had the participants with visual impairments. They were, their eyes were covered with a mask, and they could hold the pedalo, and then they moved with the pedalo forward. So we just manipulated, sorry, this is like incorrect full vision versus no vision, only without vision. So we just manipulated with the direction of attention, so focus on the platform or focus on your feet. And there was also control group. And the design was between subjects. And yeah, it's interesting findings we had here. As you can see, over the course of training, there was huge progress in the external focus. The movement time was the dependent variable here. So external focus group had progress here and was better than internal focus during the day 1, also during the day 2 when we conducted retention and transfer test. So the transfer test was to move pedalo as fast as possible forward, or to move pedalo as fast as possible backward. So as you can see in all learning tests, external focus was better than control and internal focus. Only in the last transfer test, control also was better than internal focus. So in this study, we suggest that an external focus related to internal focus of attention facilitates the performance and learning of a continuous motor task, riding a pedalo, in individuals with severe visual impairments. In another experiment, the same study, it was a within subject design. We wanted to avoid individual differences, and then we used this soccer kicking task. So the participants initially, they could feel the ball, and there was a target, and then after feeling the ball, they kick the ball. So concentrate on the ball, and all concentrate on the inside of the foot, because this is a very typical instructions is also in football, and for the kicking, and then no focus instructions. So in this study, in this experiment also, we found that there was an advantage for external focus compared to only internal focus. So we concluded that an external focus facilitated the performance of discrete motor actions in individuals with severe visual impairment. So another study conducted by a group of researchers in Taiwan, I guess, and they had a huge sample size, which is amazing, 186 participants. So, and this study was conducted on children with developmental coordination disorders. And they manipulated, the task was holding the pole horizontal as stable as possible. As you can see here, there was a marker here, yeah, and then in the external focus, they were asked them to focus on the midpoint of the pole, and internal focus focused on their hand and no focus instruction. So this task was conducted in the in no visual condition. So there was no visual information for them for performing this task. And the design was between subjects. So as you can see here, there were some differences also in the postural sway in anterior posterior here, and also in the pole anterior posterior displacement. So the generally TD group performed better than DCD group, and overall external focus was performing better than internal focus for children with DCD to maintain their balance while vision is removed. It is also interesting. So the conclusion of this study was that for both children with DCD and TDC, an external focus was more effective in concurrently facilitating suprapostural task performance when holding a pole horizontal and immobile and promoting greater postural stability than either internal or no focus conditions. Another study that we conducted in our lab, it was on children with developmental coordination disorders. The design of this study was within subject, and the task was to perform a maximal vertical counter movement jump with an arm swing. So in the external focus, we were asking them to getting as close as to the ceiling as possible. And internal focus concentrated on swimming of your arms and control no focus instructions. So in this study also, we use some kinematic measures, not only performance outcome, but generally, as you can see, TD children, they were better than DCD children, which was predictable. And jump height was better under external focus compared to internal focus. And in addition, velocity of takeoff was also better under external focus than internal focus. So actually, external focus could influence on the velocity of the takeoff as well. So it's not only performance outcome, but also some kinematic measures were influenced by external focus of attention. So that was the suggestion of this study. External focus is better than internal focus for optimizing motor performance of the whole body coordination task in TD children as well as DCD children. So I think I already gave you a general overview about the studies related to attention focus. Of course, there are a couple of studies which didn't find any differences, but there were some sort of meta-analysis published in 2021, which in that meta-analysis, Gabi Wolf addressed the issues with some of those studies. But I think the most interesting and relevant topic for this summer school might be about the underlying mechanism. So there are two perspectives. One is about cognitive perspective, and the second one is the perceptual perspective. Which one is relevant for the external focus of attention? So initially, we talk about the perceptual perspective. In this regard, there are a few studies. The main question of this study is that is vision is a mediator for advantages of external focus of attention or not? So my colleague William Land, he conducted, I think, the first study regarding this, the role of vision. It was a really interesting study. And then he used the golf putting task, and there was a between subject design. The participants, they performed the task under full vision and occluded vision, and used these goggles to manipulate with the vision during the online control of the movement. So when participants, they wanted to perform the task, so in this phase that they wanted to hit the ball, the goggles, the vision was limited, was occluded in that moment. So under external focus, they focus on the direction and speed of the ball rolling to the hole, and then they didn't have internal focus. They had no focus concentration and secondary tongue counting in irrelevant focus actually. So overall, performance under full vision was better than non-vision, which was predictable. And interesting finding is that external focus was better than control and irrelevant focus condition. So the conclusion of this study was that external focus effects are strong and independent of the online visual information. After that, I conducted another experiment using a jumping task, as you can see here. So there were 18 students. It was a counter movement jump. It was a within subject design. It's good always to conduct between and within subject design if there will be some individual differences among the people or not. And they performed the job under full vision and non-vision. And we manipulated with external, internal, and control condition, as you can see, concentrated on the ceiling and try to reach the ceiling, and all concentrate on your fingers and bring them up as high as possible. But the goal of the task was jump as high as possible. So we didn't change the goal of the task. And control no focus instructions. So as you can see here, again, the performance under full vision was better than non-vision, and external focus was better than control and internal focus condition. So in this study, compared to the previous study conducted by my colleague William Land, we included internal focus for this condition, and we used a different task and design. So we concluded that vision does not mediate the advantages of an external focus for the tasks that rely more heavily on vision for body transport. So after these two studies, in addition to the study that we conducted with individuals with severe visual impairments, and we still found that there are benefits for external focus even when vision is removed. So we concluded that vision does not mediate the beneficial effects of any external focus of attention in motor tasks that are under either feed-forward or feedback motor control systems. So if vision is not, so what is responsible? So then cognitive perspective. So, which is your area of expertise, of course. I'm just trying to present a couple of studies in this area. I have no idea about neuroscience. I'm not expert in that. So just to give you some ideas about studies which has been conducted on attention focus to understand the underlying mechanisms of attention focus with regard to cognitive perspective. So one study, I think it's a very interesting study conducted by colleagues from Switzerland. And in this study, they use a finger abduction task to keep the target level at the 30% and or 10% of maximum voluntary contractions. And then they manipulated with attention focus. As you can see, they concentrate on the goniometer angle or concentrate on the muscle and finger. And they used EMG, and also they used TMS just for the 10%. So I just put this information here. If somebody is interested in knowing that why TMS is used, you can get some idea. So the TMS was conducted on the area of M1, primary motor cortex, and then when the first task was to hold this object when it was 30% of maximum voluntary contraction. And as you can see, the time to task fatigue was longer in the external focus compared to internal focus, under 30% of maximum voluntary contractions. But I think this might be more interesting for you, which was when they asked participants to perform under 10% of the target maximum voluntary contractions, the purpose was to avoid the effects of the fatigue. Then you can see that here EMG activity in the external focus was significantly higher than internal focus, and also short interval intercortical inhibition, which is famous to CK, was the amplitude of the movement evoked potentials was larger in the external focus compared to internal focus of attention. This was an interesting study, I think, in my opinion. So the idea is that if CK is smaller, like is relevant to poor development of intercortical inhibition, impairs motor function. So in general, the findings of this study propose that focusing internally or externally results in the different organization and integration within primary motor cortex. The same group of researchers, they conducted another experiment a year later, and this is also very interesting design. I like it very much. The task was a bit different, so it was the finger flexion task, and then they also manipulated with the internal or external focus. External focus exert pressure on the force transducer, and internal focus contract your finger flexion muscle. So a within subject design was used, and as you can see here in the figure, in the right part, they delivered TMS in wire control and also in the premotor phase and the phasic and also in the tonic phase. So first of all, they asked participants to produce the maximum voluntary contraction. As you can see, the Fmax and their external focus was more than internal focus in general. But I think the most interesting finding might be here, which is like they found some differences in the surround inhibition in the premotor and phasic phase. So the authors, they in the paper they have written that surround inhibition is more prominent with low force levels and disappears at intensities higher than 40% of maximum voluntary contraction. It seems that surround inhibition is predominantly involved in the generation of skilled and fine motor tasks. So they concluded that surround inhibition in motor cortex can be instantly modulated during the premotor phase according to attentional focus in healthy individuals. So these were just two studies which is relevant more to neuroscience and to cognitive perspective for understanding the underlying mechanism of attention focus. But in the field of motor learning and performance, the most validated, I would say, hypothesis is constraint action hypothesis, which was presented by Dr. Wolf in 2001. And in this hypothesis, the suggestion is that internal focus constrains the movement and disrupt the automaticity control of the movement, and that's why it degrades the performance. On the other hand, external focus promotes automatic control processes and enhances performance. Like simply, I try to present the idea behind the constraint action hypothesis. So most relevant is about automaticity. So there are a couple of evidence for constraint action hypothesis. Some evidence are from previous studies. I just try to summarize them. At the muscular level, an external focus manifests itself in reduced co-contractions, more efficient recruitment of the muscle fibers within muscles. That's some studies conducted by Lowes, Kate Lowes. He conducted a lot of study on EMG. And then, as I already presented, the focusing internally or externally results in a changes within primary motor cortex. That could be also evidence for supporting constraint action hypothesis. And there is another thing which Gabi Wolf presented in the paper in 2016, which they are proposing that differences in functional connectivity of the brain motor networks might be the reason for facilitating goal-action coupling. So actually, in the schematic of optimal theory for motor learning, as you can see here, external focus promotes goal-action coupling and task focus, and that's why it enhances motor performance and motor learning. But there is no direct evidence for it. So this proposal, we try to somehow, in to a study, we try to have a look at this idea of goal-action coupling, and we found interesting findings, which I'd like to present it. In one study, we used a very simple bowling task. It was with my colleague in Spain. We conducted this experiment, and then children were asked to perform the bowling task, and we used a within subject design, and external focus on the bowling ball, internal focus on your hand, and control no focus instructions. In this experiment also we somehow combined also with motivational aspect. I already presented this at the beginning of the presentation. So we use the autonomy support concept as well. So in the choice conditions, children, they had opportunity to choose the ball. We put some, actually this was the idea of my colleague Miriam. So she had two children, so she knew how to, she put some stickers on the ball in the choice condition. And we didn't know that how much these stickers are effective. And then the design of the experiment, as you can see here, so it was a bit complicated design, but we manipulated with with a different attentional focus condition, and also choice, no choice, and in a counterbalance order of performance. So participants, this is not all, so there are some more. In this experiment, after finishing the each attentional focus conditions, during the performance of the task under each attention focus trial, there was a video projected behind the target. So I show you this video. And this video just for 3 seconds. So participants were ready, yeah? Ready for the performing the task? Yes, we are ready. So immediately when they wanted to start to perform the task, the video was projected behind the target. You probably are familiar with this video. And during the final trial, because there were 8 trials, projected this video. And the last trial, so you noticed, you know this video, definitely. Yeah? So you are familiar with the concept of inattentional blindness, right? So the participants didn't know that in the last trial, the video is changing. So when they finished, we asked, did you notice a difference in the last video relative to the previous, in the last trial, relative to, in the video that was projected behind the target, in the last trial compared to the previous trials? It was difficult, right? So, what is your expectation? Would you imagine that participants under internal or external or control condition noticed more distractive items? Which condition they should detect more distractive items? What is your So overall, the performance under external focus and also choice was better than no choice, and also external was better than control and internal focus. Fewer participants under external focus noticed fewer differences in comparison of internal focus and control conditions. Interesting. We didn't expect it as well. But we interpret these findings as this, like an external focus is assumed to play a dual role by directing attention to the task goal and reducing a focus on the self or other task of activities. I think this is important finding. Sorry. I don't know how to get back. Because it says to us something about external focus. So when we induce it, all concentration is on the task goal. To perform the task properly. And another study, which is also published yesterday in the International Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology, this is also like very, I think, interesting design, might be interesting for you as a neuroscientist, because somehow during this summer school, I understood that you are really struggling with those situations, I mean, during the movement, and I mean, if you want to measure some brain activities, this might be also interesting for you. Not sure, but just I will try to present it. So in this study, we also had, it was an interceptive task. 24 healthy children were used, and it was the floorball drag shot. Participants, I don't know how to, yeah, I am in the right direction. So there was a ramp over there. So participants, they should stay here. And there was a starting line. They hold the stick. And then I was releasing the ball for them. And there were two sensors which detect the movement initiations of the stick. And there was another sensor there which actually detects the movement of the initiation of the ball movement there. So then I was releasing the ball, and then they perform the task to the target. I don't know how it works with neuroscientific stuff, but might be interesting. So and then they had an eye tracker. So that was the task. Something like this. So, and we manipulated with attention focus on the blade of the stick, or focus on your hand, and control, no focus instruction. It was a within subject design. And the reason that here we instructed them to focus on the blade, we didn't want to have confound with the vision in the external focus. We could ask them to focus on the ball, of course, but we didn't want to make a huge difference between the direction of attention. So internal and external, like a small difference between the direction of attention, and to see if it is working. And we looked at the eye blinks. So the findings of this study showed that external focus in the performance accuracy outcome scores, they were better than internal focus. And I think the most interesting finding was that the number of eye blinks in the external focus was lesser than internal and control conditions. So we interpret these findings that external focus probably enhances cognitive stability, as indicated by lower number of eye blinks relative to internal focus of attention. Thereby, it improves motor performance of an interceptive timing task. So this is some new outcome, some new suggestions for people who are working maybe in motor control area and who are interested in like looking at the cognitive function to see whether there are some changes there or not, because eye blinks is connected to cognitive function. So that's also a new evidence. So I think the last topic of this presentation will be, does external focus work overall for everyone? There was one new, as I already mentioned at the beginning of presentation, is a meta-analysis paper just published by Chua, and Gabriele Wolf is the last author, you can see. And in this meta-analysis, I think it's an interesting one. I had a chance to read it all because it was really difficult to follow, but at the end I could follow it. They provided comments on the studies that they didn't find any effect, or they found maybe internal is better than the external. But they are proposing that in this meta-analysis that the external focus is superior to an internal focus, whether considering tests of motor performance or learning, and regardless of the age, health condition, and level of skill expertise. So it's worthy to also have a look at this meta-analysis paper that was recently published in the last year. Regardless of this, what could be the potential moderators for effectiveness of the attentional focus? This might be also interesting questions for the future research. And we also conducted one study with one colleague from Iran, and we also have some interesting findings. I will present it because there is a question whether attention focus has some sort of interaction with the motor imagery ability of the people. And already there has been some studies regarding the attention focus and motor imagery, and the aim of our study was to examine if children motor imagery modality dominance in terms of external visual imagery, internal visual imagery, and kinesthetic imagery influences the relationship between attention focus and motor learning of an overarm ball tossing task. So here is the experimental design. So there were also quite nice sample size. 138 boys participated in this study. It was a tossing tennis ball task. And there was like pre-test, acquisition, and also retention. There was only two groups. External focus concentrated on the ball, and internal focus concentrated on the tossing arm. And in this study, we used a motor imagery questionnaire for children to actually understand their motor imagery dominance in terms of external visual imagery, which allows individuals to visualize themselves from a third-person perspective, or internal visual imagery that involves visualization of the movement from the performance visual perspective, and kinesthetic imagery dominance is more attuned to sensing movement and body limb positions, such as the feeling of the sense of the force, or feeling of the movement of the arm, for example. So this is also interesting findings, which might be also interesting for you. And as you can see, initially, the performance outcome for external focus was better than internal. We use a regression analysis here, which was also, I think, novelty of this study. And we found out that external focus instructions, as you can see here in this line, this is external and this is internal, did not improve the motor learning in children with a higher level of internal visual motor imagery ability. External focus was better, but did not improve it. Here is internal focus. It looks like a little bit like effective, but still external focus is higher. External focus instructions, the second interesting finding, improve motor learning in children with a higher level of external visual motor imagery ability. So you can see that it's really effective on these people who have higher level of learning. And internal focus didn't help much. And the last one, is external focus instruction reduced motor learning in children with a higher level of kinesthetic motor imagery ability. As you can see here, internal focus was not beneficial for them, and external focus was better than internal focus, but still was not really helping them. So what I can say here that like as a conclusion is like even though external focus was generally better than internal focus for all motor imagery modalities, these results indicate that differences in motor imagery modality dominance play a considerable role when learning a novel motor skill. And this study actually may also indicates that inconsistencies in the past findings may be due to differences in children motor imagery modality dominance, because in the literature there are quite a lot of studies which support the advantages of external relative to internal in the adults population, but when it comes to children there are like some kind of inconsistencies. So we propose this idea here that if you want to use external focus for children population, you should consider also like the motor imagery modality of the children as well. And what is interesting like in the finding is that it's not, you probably know better than me, that 60% of the population, based on the information that exists on internet, are more they are using external visual imagery, more than 60% of the people. So maybe that's also one of the reasons that you can find inconsistencies in some of the findings. So thank you so much for, I think that was the last slide, I hope. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. I hope the presentation was interesting for you and informative.
Thank you, Reza. Are there any questions? I see them over there.
Thank you so much. I think the message was pretty clear. External focus is superior. Yeah. So I just wondered why, like the control group was not like sometimes, or you just did not mention always, but like this superiority of the external focus was not always better than the control. And I wondered whether this is like just a task related thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you already have the answer. Yeah. I think it was a really good question. Thank you for your question. Yes, of course, like not all the time you can find a difference between external focus and control. You may find it in certain tasks, but some tasks, for example, interceptive tasks, the nature of the task is external. So you induce the participants, or if you just allow them to choose whatever they want to focus on, definitely they focus on the object. So, and we already published, I published like 2 papers. One, it was in 2017, it was a catching task, and we used a questionnaire just to verify what they are focusing on while different conditions. And then the control conditions, I think if I remember well, about 75% of the participants, they were answering that they are focusing on the external cues, so which is like normal. And we didn't find also any significant differences in the performance outcome. In this interceptive task, it was the same. In the control, we use also the questionnaire. I usually use the questionnaire in my studies, like just simple question, what did you focus on? And to some extent, for example, on each cue. And in this study, it was the same. Like majority of participants in the control condition, they were saying to me that, okay, they are focusing on the object, for example, or something else in the environment. Depends on the task.
I think Actually, now I got my better question, actually. So I was wondering if the task has like a goal, so I'm concentrating on this goal, and then you, like with instructing the participant to focus on something else, you may even like make it harder to do the task. So like for me, focusing on the thing that I have in my hand, or ping pong or whatever, is harder than focusing on the ball to solve the task to get the ball to the other person.
Yeah.
But if I have to focus on something else, of course, maybe the ping pong plate or however it's called, is easier than my hand.
Yeah, so I would like here to, thanks, really good questions. You know, you are encouraging me to explain more. So in some, I don't know if you have been probably attending in some courses related, for example, to tennis. I remember myself, the coach was telling me all the time, like, keep the angle of your elbow in certain degrees. That was the instruction that I was receiving, for example. And I remember it, like, he was always like, just do this, just keep it. He didn't mention anything about the racket or in the ball. All information was about my hand, okay? I just wanted to let you know in this, like, just a realistic example of the situation when it comes to the coaching and training, right? But of course, when it comes to the experiment, it's a different story. So, experimental setup, certain instructions, certain manipulations, more restrictions, but in reality, that's the reality. You get it? Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you also very much for the talk, and I think you're really also only just starting to unfolding like with more and more in a lot of ways. I would like to go back to the topic of Parkinson's once again, because I think also for me it appears that it could be very, very promising in Parkinson's because it's basically it's a disorder really that affects the top-down control or the movement initiation from itself, and they find it much more easy to use external cues for things. And now there's a Dutch company that, for example, use a laser pointer shoes that puts like an external cue on the floor, and for them it stops the freezing of gait to a considerable extent. So I wonder whether you can comment a little bit on the effects they found. You mentioned Parkinson's psychosis, I think, whether the effects were considerably high, and whether you think, or whether there's also something that's been used, for example, in gait training for Parkinson's or so.
You mean the Parkinson's disease, right? Yeah. Well, they found, if I remember, like from top of my mind, because I didn't study it so much in details, they found a progress in both groups. I mean, internal and external focus group, like from the, I think, from the pre-test to post-test, if I remember well, the design of the study. But this scaling system that they used, that was just showed that there might be some association between external focus, because in that group, in the external focus, they use that, in both groups they use the questionnaire, there's a scaling system, and then based on the scaling system they propose that there might be some changes in the basal ganglia. But in practice, for walking tasks, for example, which is maybe one of the main issues of the Parkinson's disease, I think we are still struggling with it to find the proper instructions for them. Because we are also like conducting some experiments with walking. So which kind of cues we may use to, external focus cues, of course, to enhance their walking. Because walking is already kind of an automated task. So I don't know how it comes when it comes to the Parkinson's disease, how it works. So it's a bit difficult here.
Well, I know that they use like cues on the floor. So if there's a floor that has, for example, tiles, and already provide sort of feedback, and for them it's easier, I think, to use these cues and stuff.
I think that may work.
Visual perception.
I think that may work.
Yeah, and I think they do that. So this is like,
I think that may work.
yeah.
Some visual cues on the walking way. I think it works.
Just very nice presentation, a little bit different perspective on attention as from those of us who are working in cognitive neuroscience or psychology, you know the story with broadband and so forth. But I was just very interested about one report. You were measuring the transfer of motor learning, and you didn't say nothing about the transfer. So there was a study about visually impaired people, and you were also measuring the transfer.
Yeah, transfer.
So in the output, at the end, in the conclusion, there was no word of the transfer of the motor learning. The question here is, how did you measure the transfer? And apparently there was no any transfer of motor learning.
There was a transfer test, like I mentioned, that it was like riding pedalo backward. So that was a transfer test.
Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, so the task was riding pedalo forward during the training session, and the transfer test was the riding pedalo backward. So that was a transfer test.
So basically it was a sort of transfer within the same motor activity.
Yes, yes.
A transfer to another motor activity.
No, like yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we have one last question before the break.
Yeah, thank you for the nice presentation. I was wondering who or which, on individual basis, who would benefit most on which instructions?
Can you a little bit?
So on the individual level, who would benefit most from which instructions? So I could imagine, for example, when you are treating motor disorders, that it would make sense that you start with an internal focus of attention, and then later on continue with an external focus of attention. So what do you suggest for the methods in treating motor disorders? So would you always recommend to external focus of attention? And the second part, when for healthy individuals, I was wondering, maybe it does not make sense to provide them with or give them a specific focus of attention. Maybe it's better to just use an implicit learning approach. For example, as the sketching task, maybe the effect might be even better or higher when you just instruct them catch the ball, without an external or internal focus of attention.
Yeah. So thanks for the question. First of all, about using the concept of attention focus for like in the individual level, I would say. Implicit learning, explicit learning. Their recommendation is that go to the person when is necessary. But the time that the person needs some instructions, then provide external focus instructions. That's the basic idea. So maybe this is like compromise between the implicit learning and explicit training. So it's like kind of something between them. We don't want to say that, okay, every trial or every second trial, every third trial, go to athletes and try to provide external focus instructions. No, that's not. That's for experiments, of course. But in reality, what is applicable in the field? Okay, see if the athlete is, if the person is struggling, has a problem, has some questions. Oh, I don't know what to do. Then it's your job as a coach, as a trainer, as instructor, go and try to help the person. So that might be the answer to your question. And for motor movement disorders also, well, I think for me, even though this meta-analysis paper was published, but for me, still, I think there should be more experiments on people with different clinical conditions to really verify whether the external focus is effective on all these clinical populations with movement disorders. So I still, even though I am like close collaborator of the Gabi Wolf, but I would say still for the clinical population we need more studies. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Reza, once again.
Yeah.
There is one small present for you. It's coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
providing-
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.